He knocked out 46 men, ruled a division for nearly a decade, and still, they barely mention his name. Bob Foster died at 73, but I bet you didn't even know that. Nor did you know what life after boxing was like for him. Because when people talk about boxing legends, Ali, Frazier, Foreman, he's almost always left out. But why? He wasn't just dominant. He owned the light heavyweight division, racking up 14 brutal title defenses and laying out nearly every man who dared challenge him. By the numbers alone, he should be in the pantheon. But Foster's legacy is complicated. Maybe it was the weight class, maybe it was politics, or maybe it was something deeper. Because Bob Foster didn't just fight in the ring, he fought racism, obscurity, and a system that used him, then forgot him. One bout in apartheid South Africa put him at the center of a global firestorm. But that wasn't the beginning of his battle. Because before he faced crowds and controversy, Bob Foster had to conquer a very different fight, the one called life. His story doesn't start under the bright lights of Madison Square Garden. It starts in the shadows of Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he was raised by a single mother after his father walked out. There was no roadmap, no silver spoon. The community around him, especially the tight-knit group known as the River Rats, helped shape his sense of belonging and responsibility. Albuquerque's South Valley wasn't an easy place for a young black kid to grow up, but it was a place that taught Foster about loyalty, toughness, and how to keep moving forward no matter what. Structure came from an unlikely source, the father of his childhood friend Lorenzo Brown. That man became the role model Foster never had, a steady hand, a real example. Without him, Foster might have gone the same route as so many others around him, nowhere. Even his identity wasn't secure. For years, he believed he was born in Lubbock, Texas, until a passport application in 1963 revealed the truth. His real birthplace was Borger, Texas, an oil boomtown with a rough reputation. Another reminder that nothing in Foster's life was simple, not even his origin story. But the real fire was forged in Albuquerque. No fancy gyms, no managers chasing talent. Just a kid who learned early that no one was coming to save him. While others drifted into trouble, Foster found discipline. He wasn't interested in taking the easy way out. He wanted to stand out. Boxing wasn't love at first punch. At first it was just a way to burn off steam, to stay out of trouble. But once he stepped into the ring, something clicked. The sport gave him control, a sense of purpose, and a place where everything depended on his own preparation and will. The first time he laced up gloves, he might not have known where it would lead, but he understood that he was in charge of his own destiny inside those ropes. That's when he knew. This wasn't just a hobby, it was a way out. But Foster wasn't molded in flashy gyms or under the wing of some legendary trainer. His real education came in two places, the Golden Gloves and the U.S. Air Force, and it was the military that truly hardened him. The inter-service boxing circuit wasn't for show. It was a war zone of hungry fighters, each one chasing glory and respect. Foster thrived in it, the structure, the discipline, the no-nonsense grind. It was exactly what he needed. Where other fighters coasted on raw talent, Foster sharpened his. He learned how to weaponize his reach, refine his timing, and impose his will, not just with power, but with precision. He didn't just become a boxer, he became a weapon. By the time he turned professional in March 1961, Foster was 23 and ready to show what he could do. His debut, a 2-round knockout win over Duke Williams in Washington, D.C., wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. He had power, he had resolve, and he had a chip on his shoulder from all those years of fighting for his place in the world. But the early days weren't glamorous. He wasn't headlining big cards or walking into million-dollar paydays. He fought in small venues and dingy gyms where the locker rooms smelled like desperation and the only thing guaranteed was pain. These were the fights no one talks about, the ones that shape you. And shape him they did. Foster's rise wasn't meteoric, but it was relentless. Step by brutal step, he carved his way through the light heavyweight ranks, with the quiet fury of a man with something to prove, not just to the world, but to himself. The scars and lessons from Albuquerque and Borger, the guidance from surrogate mentors, and the grind of his early career all combined to create a fighter who was more than just tough. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, but Foster was coming. And when he arrived, the division would never be the same. What set him apart wasn't just his physical gifts, it was the way he endured, learned, and kept moving forward when others would have given up. Before he became a champion, before the world knew his name, he was already building the foundation for a run in the light heavyweight division that few would ever match. So what does it really take to dominate an entire division for years? For Bob Foster, the answer was forged long before he ever put on a championship belt. And once he settled into the light heavyweight division, everything started to click. He'd already learned some hard lessons chasing bigger men in the heavyweight ranks. Losses to Doug Jones and Ernie Terrell made it clear the size gap was real. So in 1967, he made a decision that would define his career: drop down, focus up, and destroy everything in his path. The results spoke for themselves: 7 straight wins, 6 by knockout, all in a single year. It was the start of something no one in the division could ignore, because Foster had finally found his zone, and now everyone else had to survive in it. By March 24, 1968, Foster was ready for the big stage. Madison Square Garden under the bright lights, he faced Dick Tiger, a man who wasn't just a champion, but a 2-time world middleweight king, known for his grit and skill. He entered with a calm that seemed almost cold. Foster walked into the ring with ice in his veins and a look that said one thing: this ends tonight. And in the 4th round, it did. One right hand. Lightning fast, devastatingly clean. It didn't just drop Tiger, it shut him off completely. Just like that, the belt changed hands, and a new king was crowned. That knockout didn't just earn Foster the world light heavyweight title, it sent shockwaves through boxing. Tiger was no easy target, and Foster's win was the kind of upset that made people sit up and take notice. What happened next is what sets Foster apart from almost anyone who's ever laced up gloves at 175 pounds. Over the next 6 years, he didn't just defend his title, he owned it. 14 successful title defenses, 13 different challengers, and most of them didn't last long. 14. That's a number that stands out even among the sport's greatest. And it wasn't just the quantity, it was the way he did it. Foster finished 46 of his 56 career wins by knockout, including many of those title fights. His right hand became legendary. Trainers built entire game plans around avoiding it. Fighters watched hours of tape, trying to solve the puzzle. Almost none did. He was one of boxing's hardest-hitting champions, and everyone in the division knew it. The stories from those years tell you everything about Foster's grip on the division. Opponents came in with confidence and left battered, sometimes before the fight really even started. That reach, the timing, the sense that he could end a fight with a single shot. There was a respect in how people talked about him. But make no mistake, they were afraid of him. Because facing Bob Foster wasn't just risking a loss, it was risking a knockout that could haunt you for the rest of your career. He wasn't invincible, but he was relentless. Take the 1969 fight against Frank DePaula. Foster was knocked down in the first round, but he didn't lose his head. He got up, regrouped, and knocked DePaula out soon after. That kind of resilience was just as much a part of his legacy as his power. Even as he ruled the light heavyweight division, Foster couldn't ignore the pull of greater challenges. He looked up at the heavyweights and saw legends: Ali, Frazier, names that would echo through boxing history. He knew the risks, but he stepped up anyway. Foster wasn't just outgunned in size. He was sent to fight legends in their prime with zero protection. Promoters didn't care. The paychecks did. He faced Joe Frazier in 1970, giving up weight, reach, and almost every physical advantage. The result was brutal. Foster was knocked out in the second round. 3 years later, he went up against Muhammad Ali. surviving until the 8th but getting knocked down repeatedly by a man who outweighed him by more than 40 pounds. These weren't victories, but they weren't failures either. Foster showed he wasn't afraid to walk into the giant's den, even when the odds were stacked high. All the while, he kept coming back to the division he ruled. His dominance wasn't just about numbers or highlight reel knockouts. It was about the way he kept coming, the way he never let go of that title once it was his. For over 6 years, the light heavyweight crown was his, and his alone. Yet even as he crushed the division, he refused to stay put. He wanted more, even if it meant walking into the giant's den. Sometimes, though, the biggest challenges weren't just about size or skill. They came from stepping into places where the fight meant more than just a title, where the world outside the ring was just as charged as the battle inside. In 1973, Bob Foster agreed to defend his light heavyweight title against Pierre Fourrier in Johannesburg, South Africa, a place where the rules of the ring couldn't hide the reality outside it. This wasn't just another title defense. It was a fight staged in the heart of apartheid, a system that forced people to live divided lives by law. Foster, an African-American world champion, was stepping into a situation that went far beyond boxing. By then, South Africa was already isolated from most of the sporting world. The Olympics, soccer, and many other sports had banned South African teams and athletes in protest of apartheid. But boxing was different. The World Boxing Association, unlike most major sports organizations, still maintained its affiliation with the South African Boxing Board of Control in 1974, which meant title fights like Foster versus Fourrier could still happen in Johannesburg. There was money on the table, $200,000, the biggest payday of his career, and a chance to make history, whether he wanted that kind of spotlight or not. The tension was thick before the first punch was thrown. At the weigh-in, Foster claimed Fourrier looked him in the eye and said, "Tonight's the night, boy." To Foster, that word, boy, wasn't just a jab. It was a loaded insult, a word used to belittle black men in America, and a reminder of the racism he'd faced all his life. Fourrier denied using the word as an insult, and his manager, Alan Tawil, chalked it up to a misunderstanding, maybe Foster mishearing Fourrier's South African accent. But for Foster, the sting was real, and if anything, it made him even more determined to win. Fight night at Rand Stadium drew a crowd of 40,000, whites on one side, black people on another, the lines drawn as clearly in the stands as they were in the streets outside. The officials kept the event strictly segregated, but the air was electric. For a few hours, the country's usual rules faded into the background, replaced by the drama of two men in the ring. Foster didn't let the moment get to him. He boxed with his usual control, measured, methodical, and always dangerous. Fourrier was quick and skilled, but he couldn't match Foster's power or experience. Round after round, Foster stayed a step ahead, breaking down Fourrier's defenses and leaving no doubt about who was in charge. After 15 rounds, Foster's hand was raised in victory by unanimous decision. He had defended his title, collected his record-setting purse, and without saying a word, made history as the first black man to defeat a white opponent in professional boxing in apartheid South Africa. For many black South Africans, this was more than just a win in the ring. It was a rare public moment of triumph in a society built to deny them victories of any kind. But Foster's silence outside the ring drew its own kind of attention. He refused to talk about apartheid or the political realities of the country, choosing instead to praise Johannesburg and the people he met there. Some saw this as a smart move, protecting himself and the payday he'd earned. Others, like Mark Mathabane, author of Kafir Boy, felt let down, seeing Foster's silence as a missed chance to speak out against an unjust system. The expectations were heavy, and the criticism real. Foster, intentionally or not, became part of the debate about the role athletes should play in the face of injustice. Some call it smart, others call it selling out. Either way, his silence became part of a story that boxing still doesn't want to talk about. But it's about more than just what happens between the ropes, and that fight in South Africa proved that. The victory meant different things to different people, but it left a mark that went beyond the record books. For Foster, though, life kept moving. The spotlight of the ring eventually faded, and he had to find out what came next when the cheers died down and the gloves were finally put away. Life beyond boxing looked different for him, but it was never aimless. At 36, he retired from the ring in 1978, closing a chapter most fighters can only dream of. Instead of drifting or chasing the spotlight, he put his energy into something new: law enforcement. He joined the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department in New Mexico, and it wasn't about appearances or nostalgia. Foster took the job seriously, starting as a deputy and rising through the ranks to become a detective. Around Albuquerque, folks called him the deputy sheriff or the fighting sheriff. And the same focus that made him a champion in the ring showed up in his approach to policing. For nearly 25 years, Foster worked the streets and later the investigations, serving until 1994. He brought the same discipline and sense of order to law enforcement that he had shown in boxing. Those who worked with him saw a man who didn't just rest on his athletic reputation. He earned respect day by day. He was steady, consistent, and always seemed to have a presence that commanded attention, whether he was breaking up a fight or calming down a tense situation. The badge wasn't a prop. It was another way for Foster to keep himself anchored in a life built on routine and responsibility. Even after leaving the department, he wasn't ready to fully step away from public service. He took on security work at the district court, staying connected to the community and the sense of duty that had always driven him. But his personal life was a patchwork of triumph and struggle, a reminder that no matter how strong someone looks on the outside, life can still leave scars. He married 4 times. His first marriage to Pearl brought 4 children, and even after their relationship ended, Foster stayed close to his family. His second marriage to Sue gave him another son, Nelson. But it was his third marriage to Patricia Saz that left a mark no one could have predicted. They married in 1982, but just 2 years later, in 1984, Patricia died by suicide. That kind of loss hits hard, no matter how many battles you've won. Foster kept much of his grief private, but those close to him saw the weight he carried. It was a chapter that showed how even the most disciplined and resilient people can be shaken by heartbreak. After Patricia's passing, he eventually remarried, this time to Rosetta Benjamin. The relationships weren't always easy, and the pain of loss never completely faded, but Foster kept moving forward, showing the same determination he had in the ring. The years after law enforcement were quieter, but no less meaningful. He stayed in Albuquerque, the city that had shaped him from the very beginning. There was no need for headlines or attention. He lived simply, surrounded by family, carrying with him the lessons from every stage of his life: hard beginnings, championship highs, and quiet, persistent work. In November 2015, Bob Foster died at the age of 73, with his wife Rose and family by his side in Albuquerque. He was buried at Fairview Memorial Park, the city's respect for him still strong after all those years. Foster's life was never just about what happened in the ring. The discipline, the resilience, and the courage he showed in every part of his journey made him stand out long after the last bell had sounded. And when you look at the full story, champion, father, survivor, you start to see that Foster's impact reached far beyond titles and trophies. You see a man caught between worlds, unstoppable in the ring, but quiet when the world wanted him to speak out. That paradox defined his legacy. He fought and won in a country built on segregation, but chose silence outside the ropes, walking the line that so many black athletes faced in his era. He should be mentioned alongside the greats, but instead, he's a footnote. That says more about boxing's memory than his resume ever could. Bob Foster fought on many fronts, inside the ropes, against segregation, and for his community. That's how a champion truly leaves a mark. What do you think? Is Bob Foster unfairly forgotten? Should he be ranked with the greats, or did his silence cost him his legacy? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to help us keep making content like this. See you in the next one.